Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 7 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined tonight by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It's Mark Henry Jr. You can follow him on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you feeling tonight on the eve of football's return?
I'm pumped, man. Last week, I ended the show like nerding out about college football. So last weekend was incredible. I don't even know what I'm going to do with myself having football every night, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, college and pro. It's going to be so much fun. I can't wait.
Yeah, me neither, man. And we've got a great show lined up for you guys tonight. We're going to break down week 1 NFL storylines, get you ready for all the games so you can be the smartest guy in the room at your watch parties. But before we get to that, this podcast is live on Apple Podcasts, so please follow, rate, review. And if you're watching us live here on YouTube, drop a comment in the chat as we talk about games. Fire away your questions. We'd love to interact with you guys. And so, Mark, let's kick it off with the most important game, and that is the Eagles versus the Falcons. So a little by way of injury report. Currently, the Eagles, they had a new guy show up on the injury report today. I'm not sure if you saw that, but Brandon Brooks was limited in practice with a knee injury. And then the Eagles also have Rodney McLeod and Landon Dickerson limited with knee injuries. So I don't think any of them are ruled out at this point, just something to keep an eye on. But we could honestly be looking at the first time that I can ever remember that the Eagles play every starter week 1. Meanwhile, in Atlanta's remarkably healthy. The only guy they've got on the injury report right now is linebacker Brandon Copeland, who was limited with a hamstring injury. So not a lot of injury news, which you would kind of expect week 1, but in the past that hasn't been the case for the Eagles. So what's your vibe? Do you think McLeod's going to play this week?
I have no idea. I hope so. I mean, we talked about it before. We weren't even really sure who would be the guy who would start if he weren't to play. So we definitely need him to play out there as soon as possible because that's one of the positions we're obviously not that deep at is, I would say, D-back and safety specifically. So I don't really have a vibe on if he will play, but I hope he will play.
Yeah, for sure. I saw that Darius Slay said something about he wished that McLeod could be out there week 1, and so everybody thought he spilled the beans, but then they kind of backtracked later and was like he didn't think it was possible because he was just activated from PUP. So I don't know if there's gamesmanship going on there or if Slay just didn't know the rules. But it'll be interesting to see as we kind of go along what that injury report shakes out as.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was just actually having a conversation about all the places we are deep on this team and then all of the places we aren't, and that is D-back, corner, safety specifically, and then running back and receiver probably. It's a shame that our only injury of note really is at one of those spots to start the year instead of somewhere we are deep at, like the O-line or the D-line. Not that, I want someone else to be hurt, but you know what I mean, though. It stinks that, we're very healthy, but the one spot we aren't healthy at isn't somewhere where we have an obvious replacement.
Right, which is kind of, you could get into flawed roster building with that because McLeod, it wasn't a training camp injury. It was an injury last year that everybody knew about. And so you could argue the Eagles should have done more to prepare for this contingency. But, regardless of if he plays week 1, we've talked about before, the Eagles obviously are expecting him to play in the first 3 weeks of the season or they would have put him on short-term IR. And so if we don't see him week 1, I would imagine we'll see him at least week 2 or 3. So, Mark, what are some of the matchups? What are some of the key things you're going to be watching for in this Eagles-Falcons game?
I could go a couple ways with this, so I'll start just in the trenches. I mean, I think we've said it many times on this show. I've said it on every show I've talked about the Eagles on. The Eagles are too good in the trenches to go under that 6.5 win total that Vegas has them at, to be a 4 or 5 win team that many people think they are. And one of these games where they prove that should be in week 1 against Atlanta, a team that isn't very good in the trenches. So that's kind of where I go first. Obviously, there's other ways to go about it. Like, do you think we have more of an advantage on our offensive line versus their defensive line, or on our defensive line versus their offensive line?
Ooh, that's a tough. The Eagles have a sizable advantage in both places. So let's talk first Eagles offensive line against the Falcons defensive front. So the Falcons have a terrible pass rush, one of the worst pass rushes in the league. I think Jimmy Kimsky put out a stat that the entire Falcons starting front seven has a combined 73 career sacks. So there's just not a team that can rush the passer. The Eagles offensive line, if healthy, I believe, and you believe, to be a top 3 to 5 unit in the league. And so now, obviously, if Brandon Brooks doesn't play, that could cause some issues there. But, Brandon Brooks missed the majority of last season, or he missed all of last season. And so there's guys with some experience there that can step in. The bottom line is the Eagles offensive line should be able to give Hurts plenty of time to sit in the pocket and throw. When you flip it the other way, though, the Falcons offensive line, it's kind of a mess right now. They've got Jalen Mayfield, who was a third-round pick, a rookie, and he didn't win this starting job. He was beat out by a guy who then got injured, and the guy that got injured is not a good football player. And so you've got Mayfield at left guard, and then you've got Matt Hennessy at center, who was a third-round pick last year. He played a little bit near the end of the year, and he had a 28.6 pass blocking grade from PFF, one of the worst centers in the league. And so when you've got that weak of an interior offensive line group, and you look across the line and you see Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave, like, that is a huge mismatch. And so I'm really looking for the Eagles' interior defensive line to wreak havoc in this game.
Yeah, I mean, and that's Howie's dream, right? I mean, this is a dream matchup for what Howie's. We were talking about team building in terms of McLeod being out and not having an obvious replacement. Howie, the reason that he builds in the D line is because he thinks that wins football games, and he thinks that especially against teams that have bad offensive lines. So this really should be a game that plays to the Eagles' strengths in a lot of ways. There are obviously some concerns that I'm sure we'll get to, but I mean, staying positive, I actually think I would say that the bigger advantages are our offensive line going against their defensive line. I think that defense is just, there's not a lot to get excited about the Falcons defense at all. So I'm willing to say that if this offense doesn't look very good in week 1 for the Eagles, I think it's perfectly reasonable to have some concerns at that point, because this Falcons defense is one of the worst we'll go against, especially in the early going of this year, where the Eagles do have a tough start to the schedule, especially against some tough defenses. So this is a kind of a big game for the Eagles. I know it doesn't seem like it in week 1, but due to how tough the upcoming weeks after week 1 are, it would be really big for the Eagles to come out and show that their offense is better than a lot of people seem to think it is, and show why their offensive line and their defensive line is so much better than Atlanta's. So it does play to our strengths in a lot of ways, this matchup.
Yeah, for sure. Marky Mark chiming in on Twitter says the Eagles should win this game. Eagles are better at every position than Atlanta except quarterback and wide receiver. And I'm not sure. I disagree with that. And yeah, we'll get into the predictions later, but I'll spoiler it a little bit and say that I'll be picking the Eagles to win this game. You mentioned the defense, and the Falcons defense is just bad all the way around. In 2020, they gave up the highest number of explosive passing plays in the NFL. And so they revamped their secondary. They've got 3 new starting defensive backs expected to start week 1. 2 safeties, Eric Harris and Duron Harmon, and then Fabian Moreau at cornerback. Those 3 guys signed for a total of $2.1 million. This is not a good secondary, not a good pass rush, not a good secondary. The Eagles have a ton of speed at wide receiver. I mean, that's what we prioritize. Jalen Reagor was drafted because he's fast. Quez Watkins drafted because he's fast. And Devontae Smith was drafted because he's a route runner, but he's fast too. He's not that same burner level. But the Eagles are going to have a chance to really stretch this secondary, particularly because they should have the time to set up whatever they want in the pocket. And so, I'm with you. I expect there to be maybe a little bit of a slow start. Jalen Hurts only took 10 snaps in the preseason, but the offense needs to come out and have a good showing here.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that, and it leads into a bet that I have on this game, is I think with the preseason, we weren't going to see Jalen Hurts running around, and we weren't going to see any designed runs, which I do think will be a part of this offense. So Jalen Hurts is his over-under for rush yards is set at 39.5. I think you should smash that out there if you're a gambling man listening to this. I think that is set way too low, and I think sometimes early on in the year, Vegas sets these player props and team totals and things that aren't regulated as much way too low. For instance, I was betting Patrick Mahomes over 2 touchdowns very often last year. That ended up being 2.5 to 3 every single week by the end of the year. I think this Jalen Hurts rushing yards per game prop will settle around 60. I believe I have the numbers right here for what he had last year in his 3 full games. I believe, he had 106, 63, and 69 rush yards in his 3 full games. So this is a guy who looks to run if he's in trouble, and I think that is an excellent tool to have, especially on 3rd downs and like 3rd and 5 situations. To have Jalen Hurts' legs available for those types of situations is going to be a huge part of this offense. And I think 39.5 yards is far too low. And I think that the Falcons defense could be very susceptible to Jalen Hurts' rushing attack.
Yeah, so the next thing to watch for is the Falcons have a new defensive coordinator, a guy by the name of Dean Pease. And one of the things that he's known for is the amount that he likes to rotate his coverages post-snap. So he'll show one look and then they rotate out of it at the snap. Now, Hurts doesn't have a lot of experience at the NFL level as a starter, and so I think that's a matchup to keep an eye on. If I'm the Falcons defensive coordinator, I'm going to try to spin coverages, spin safeties as much as I can. See if you can make Hurts start to doubt his eyes and maybe just try to run the ball more. Because, again, you don't have a good secondary, and so anything you can do to shake the confidence of a guy who's not exactly a seasoned starter, I do think that's something to keep an eye on for the Falcons.
And then if I'm saying something to keep an eye on for the Falcons and a reason that the Falcons could win this game, I mean, Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts. I mean, it's pretty simple. Not to boil it down to any nuts and bolts, but Kyle Pitts and Calvin Ridley could combine for 250 receiving yards in this game pretty easily against our secondary or against what do you think? I guess here's a way to start out the conversation. What do you think the attack against Kyle Pitts is going to be? How do you think that we try to cover Kyle Pitts?
Yes, I mean, Pitts is a monster, and our linebackers and safeties are shaky at best. And, I mean, that's like best case scenario. So, if I'm the Eagles, trying to game plan against the Falcons offense, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get real wide blitz angles from our defensive ends. I'm going to let, Brandon Graham, I'm going to let Derek Barnett, Josh Sweat, I'm going to let them play, wide 9 style. The Falcons really don't have much of a running game to speak of. And so I'm not going to worry about containing a run game. I'm going to get those defensive ends out wide. I'm going to try to get Cox and Hargrave to collapse the middle. And then I'm probably going to try to bring pressure from Kyle Pitts' side, maybe with an overhang linebacker. Maybe you see Jannard Avery in that role. If you can force the Falcons to think about using Pitts as an inline blocker or even just to chip before he gets out on routes, that's a huge win. And then beyond that, if I'm not trying to target Pitts, Pitts' side off the line like that, I'm honestly probably going to bracket him in coverage, bring a strong safety down to play him with outside leverage, and have a linebacker over the middle. I mean, it sounds insane to be bracketing a tight end in coverage like that, but I really do feel like he is their biggest weapon, and I really feel like Matt Ryan is going to have to get the ball out hot with a lot of pressure coming up the middle, and I want to make him look to someone other than Pitts to do that.
Well, I would say the only problem with that is Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley is a top 5 receiver. So that's where the issue is with defending this Atlanta offense. And that's what everyone's going to have a problem doing, not just the Eagles. We're just the first guys who have the crack at looking at who's the best look at Kyle Pitts. Do you use a safety? Do you use a corner? Do you use a linebacker? And I know you mentioned chipping him off the line. Obviously, I think they'll do that if he's on the line anytime. I have a feeling he's going to be split out wide on I don't know, at least half of his probably routes, I would say, maybe even more. I'm not quite sure. Obviously, we haven't seen Atlanta's offense too much with Pitts. He barely played in the preseason. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what we do when they split him out wide. Who do you think gets the first crack at covering him?
I I don't know if they're gonna. I don't really know if they'll try to bring like Eric Wilson down on him, or maybe they put Steven Nelson or Darius Slay on him, and they let the other one cover Calvin Ridley. I really don't know how the Eagles are going to handle that. Um, I think you want to try to cover him with the safety to leave your corners out there, but I just don't know if you can with the safeties that we have. I don't know if you can with the corners that we have either. Um, that's why I think you almost have to bracket him inside outside with a linebacker and a safety.
Yeah, I probably agree, and maybe you shift that if he's killing us. But yeah, Slay. This is not a great matchup for our D-backs in terms of Slay and Nelson. Neither of them are really big enough to go with Calvin Ridley, or Kyle Pitts that confidently. So that is definitely something to be concerned about, and that's the number one concern for me. I mean, if you can keep those guys under 200 receiving yards combined, I think that's a really good sign. I mean, maybe Russell Gage hurts you. I'd let Russell Gage beat us is kind of my attitude towards Russell Gage. So, and I'd let the rushing game beat us too. I mean, I'm not nervous about Mike Davis at all. So,
Yeah.
That's kind of where you got to look at in terms of attacking their offense.
Yeah, and for the Eagles offensively, attacking this Falcons defense, if I'm Nick Sirianni, I'm spreading the field. We're going to go a lot of empty backfield. I know Eagles fans want to see us run the ball. This isn't the game where I'm going to try to do that a lot. I'm going to empty the backfield out. I'm going to stretch them horizontally. I'm going to attack vertically. I'll use Jalen Hurts as a runner, but I think you want to split Miles Sanders or Kenny Gainwell out in the slot a decent amount. Get that empty backfield. Send 5 guys out on routes. Unless they prove that they're going to beat our offensive line, which I just don't see. I just really want to stretch that secondary as much as I possibly can.
No, that makes total sense. I mean, I do think hopefully we get a lead and we run the ball. But I mean, in terms of when you're trying to build a lead or if it's a close game, the way to attack them is definitely their secondary and definitely trying to get the ball to Devonta. And I mean, I think the key for the offense is probably just I think we need a second guy to step up and be the second pass catcher in this offense. And maybe that's presumptive. Maybe that's me expecting too much from Devonta Smith in his first game in the regular season as a rookie. Maybe, but I think he's the number one target, at least in this offense. So it's going to be important if we see Goddard, if we see Ertz, if we see Rager, Quez, or a running back step up as that second legitimate option for Hurts in the passing game. Or maybe maybe he spreads it around. Maybe all 5 of them get involved, or maybe it's even more people than that get involved. But I think we really need a legitimate second option behind Smith, and that's going to be important going forward, not just against Atlanta.
Absolutely. So Mark, what's your prediction for Sunday? What do you think happens in Atlanta?
If we're going for a score, I'm trying to think about the over now in my head because I like the over in the Eagles. So I'm going with the Eagles. I'll say 28-27. It's going to be a close one. It's going to be high scoring. We hold them to a couple field goals in important spots, hopefully. So I think it's close, and I think Jalen Hurts runs one in at the end of the game, minute or two left, and we take the lead and hold on, and we start off 1-0.
All right, I have the Eagles winning 24-17. So we're not terribly far off on the scores. The Eagles are 3.5-point underdogs on the road at Atlanta, and I took the Eagles money line at plus 155 for this game. I feel pretty confident in the Eagles.
Yeah, I'm personally. I will definitely probably sprinkle on the Eagles money line, but my main bet is Eagles plus 3.5, just because the Falcons play so many close games. I feel like they made I keep saying this joke, so it's not funny anymore, but I feel like they made a contract with the NFL that they have to play like 10 or 11 games that are decided by a field goal at the end of the game. I feel like the Falcons are always that team when you're watching Red Zone where it's coming down to the wire and it's just heartbreaking either way. So I feel like it's going to be a really, really close game. And that's partially why I like the over as well. Over 48.5. I like the Eagles plus 3.5 and the over 48.5. And I mentioned Jalen Hurts over 39.5 rush yards.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's kick it around the NFL. There's a big game tomorrow night. The Dallas Cowboys take on the reigning Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Mark, this time tomorrow night, is Dallas going to be in last place in the division? 0-1 start?
Absolutely. I mean, this is just, you talk about matchups. This is a nightmare matchup for the Cowboys. We've talked ad nauseum about how bad the Cowboys defense is and how bad they are against the pass attack and how bad their secondary is. And they can't cover anyone. They did nothing about it really to address it this offseason. I know they brought in Hooker. I think they brought in someone else. I don't think that they did enough to address that problem. And this is the worst maybe possible team to go against with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, OJ Howard, all of those guys all healthy to start the year with obviously Tom Brady. So I think it's a terrible matchup for the Cowboys. That's why it's an 8-point spread. And I love the Bucs to win. I won't be touching the spread, but I'll be doing the same teaser that I've seen a million people do on Twitter. And it's Bucs, 49ers, Rams, basically all money line. I think it's -1 and then money line for the other two. So I'll be rooting for Tampa to win to start off a couple teasers right.
Yeah, I mean, Tampa Bay returns every starter from a Super Bowl win, and I don't know how you pick against that, especially with you look at the matchup. Dallas has question marks with Dak's health. I mean, is Dak even at full strength? And if he is, he hasn't played a football snap in close to a year now. He didn't play in the preseason. He was held out of team drills and training camp. And so if he's at full strength, he's going to have to work that rust out. Can the Cowboys defense slow down the Bucs? I don't think so. And so you have to look at, the Cowboys are going to have to put up 30-plus points to win this game. And I just don't think, as good as their offense has the potential to be, I just don't think you can get there, even if Dak's fully healthy in that first game back, his first snaps. And so I think Tampa Bay wins this game, and I actually put money on Tampa Bay -7.5. I think they win this game pretty handily.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to pick a side, I'm obviously on Bucs money line basically, so I would definitely take Bucs -7.5. And if you made me take a look at the total, I would go with the over with these two offenses going at it. I think it's around 52, 51.5, something like that. I won't be touching it, but that's what I would look at. I'll just be rooting for Tampa, and I'll be rooting for Dallas to start 0-1.
Absolutely. So next game, the early runner for the toilet bowl, Jacksonville at Houston. Tyrod Taylor, I know you're higher on Jacksonville than I am. Tyrod Taylor is set to get the start. The Texans had the worst defense in the NFL last year. Now they remove pretty much the only good player they have on their roster in Deshaun Watson from the equation. Tyrod Taylor is going to get the start, and he's going to face off against Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. What do you think about this game?
I don't love the tone you used about the toilet bowl. Jacksonville's contending for the playoffs. You wait and see. No, I'm joking. I'm not really joking. I believe that. But everyone out there has been labeling it that. I feel like everyone likes Houston for some reason in terms of the gambling perspective. I obviously am high on Jacksonville. I'm high on Trevor Lawrence. I think he shows why they're going to win over 6.5 games. And one of those big reasons I liked it was because you get 2 Texans wins. I think this is a win. I like them -2.5. So that's a bet that I already put a couple units on. So I'm pretty confident just because I have no idea how Houston's covering Shenault, Shark, and Marvin Jones. It's an underrated receiver trio. Not a lot of people are talking about it because there are obviously some concerns about the Jags O-line. Obviously, they lost ETN, but they still have plenty of weapons for Trevor Lawrence to work with.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the Jags take this game. I've got no faith in Houston. I have very little faith in Urban Meyer, but I think Trevor Lawrence overcomes that, especially against a defense that's just so bad on paper. And so I think Jacksonville starts out. What, they win one game last year? Is that what they won?
They won week 1.
Yeah, I think Jacksonville repeats. They win week 1, and I think they'll win more than one game this year. But I think they matched their total from last year in week 1. So let's move on to the Los Angeles Chargers at the Washington football team. What do you think about this game?
So just a quick blurb on this game because this is new news. Austin Eckler missed practice today, hamstring injury. So I already made a couple bets on this game. I wish I would have held off and waited. I have the Chargers money line. This is a pick 'em in Vegas. And I also have Chargers team total over 22.5 points. I believe eight of Herbert's last 12 starts last year, they scored over 22.5 points. So I know Washington has a really good defense, but we've talked about it before about Washington on this show. Ryan Fitzpatrick can be a turnover machine, so you can get a lot of short fields. I think the Chargers will score 23-plus points in this game, and I also think that their defense, with a lot of the pieces back that were hurt last year, I think that the Chargers are a team that can win double-digit games. I have them at 11-6, so they're going to have to win games like this against Washington on the road. I'm going Chargers money line.
So I've got, the Washington defense, they're elite. And this team, we've talked about it before, they really feel like they're a quarterback away from being a legit competitor. And so the question is, can Ryan Fitzpatrick play well enough to start the season off with a win? And to be honest, I don't know how you answer that question, because you can just flip a coin to see if Fitzpatrick's going to throw 3 touchdowns or 3 picks. I wouldn't touch this game in terms of betting, but I do feel like Washington gets off to a good start here. I feel like they go 1-0 to start the year. Marky Mark chiming in, pointing out it's the Chargers traveling cross country for a 1 p.m. game, which is also something to consider. It's kind of out of that normal routine, but I feel good about Ryan Fitzpatrick, at least for one game. And I think Washington starts the year off with a win.
Yeah, I'm higher on the Chargers than most. And I don't believe much in the West Coast traveling across the country anymore. Last year, that wasn't very profitable. And also, it's week 1, so I don't necessarily know if it has the same effect. So, but I just think the Chargers are a better team, so I'm going with the Chargers.
All right. Next game, we have the Seattle Seahawks traveling to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. So Seattle had the number 31 pass defense last year. Carson Wentz was the worst quarterback in the league last year. So this is literally a case of a very stoppable force meets a very movable object. And so what do you think happens in this game, Mark?
Not to mention that the Colts probably have the worst receivers in the league, and also T.Y. Hilton's hurt. So it's a real bad matchup for both sides there. So I'm going with Seattle. I think Seattle gets started right, even on the road. I'm going with -2.5. I think they win the game. Not much to say, really, outside of the fact that I just don't believe in Carson Wentz with those receivers and behind that offensive line with whatever he's coming off of. I know that he was a full participant in practice today, and he's all systems go for week 1. But, we've said it. I don't think it's a great sign that they rushed him back. And I think that it's kind of – we've said it many times. It looks like this Colts season could turn into a disaster.
Yeah, Paris Campbell's also showed up on their injury report. Quentin Nelson, Eric Fisher are both on the injury report. Xavier Rhodes. I mean, I don't know how you expect Carson Wentz to have changed teams, got no reps in the preseason, and then come in and play well with no wide receivers and no offensive line in front of him. I mean, I really feel like it's the Eagles last year all over again for him, with the injuries at receiver, the injuries at offensive line. And I mean, I hate that, because I did want to see, I wanted to see, was 2017 Carson Wentz real? Was 2019 Carson Wentz real? Can Frank Wright get him back to that? And I just don't feel like, events have not transpired to set up a way for us to find out the answer to that question. I think Seattle wins this game. I think they win it pretty comfortably. And I also put money on the Seahawks -2.5 for this game.
We're on the same side. Let's go.
All right. Next game, Toilet Bowl number 2, the New York Jets at the Carolina Panthers. Maybe I should stop calling these games Toilet Bowls. We're going to alienate some of our fan bases. But the Jets travel to Carolina for the Sam Darnold revenge game. I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
You talk about, I don't know what side to go on here. This is an ultimate stay away for me. I won't be touching this from a gambling perspective. Carolina has a way better roster. Wilson might be a little bit better than Darnold, even this young. I don't like either quarterback, really. I'm going to go with Carolina to win the game just because it's at home. I think they have a better roster outside quarterback, so we'll see. I have no idea what's going to happen in this game, to be quite honest.
Yeah, skipping back to Seattle, Marky Mark chiming in. He says he thinks Seattle will win, but doesn't make the playoffs. That defense is too weak. Who would have ever thought several years ago at the height of the Legion of Boom that we would be talking about the Seattle defense being the Achilles heel to keep them out of the playoffs. But so the Jets and the Panthers, I mean, Sam Darnold has far superior weapons to Zach Wilson. He's got DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Christian McCaffrey is back.
Robbie Anderson revenge game, by the way.
Robbie Anderson revenge game. So, I mean, yeah. And so Darnold's got chemistry with Anderson, too, from his time in New York. I think Wilson outplays Sam Darnold. I'm totally out on Sam Darnold. But I think the Panthers get the win. They've got the better roster. They've got the better coach. And even though they don't have the better quarterback, I think they overcome that at home.
Agreed.
All right, moving it right along, we've got the Minnesota Vikings at the Cincinnati Bengals. What do you think here, Mark?
Yeah, this is another stay away. I think the Vikings are -3. Really don't know what to expect out of Burrow, how rusty he's going to look. Don't know what to expect out of this Bengals offense in general. How will Mixon look? He started off the season very slow historically. And then, Jamar Chase has looked really bad in training camp and in the preseason, had a lot of drops issues. How does he fit in with Higgins and Boyd? What's the target percentage there? I'm really curious to see how this Bengals offense works. The Vikings, you kind of know what you're going to get as long as they're healthy with Dalvin Cook, a whole lot of Dalvin Cook and a sprinkling of Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen on offense. So hopefully Kirk Cousins doesn't turtle in the pocket and take too many unnecessary sacks, doesn't throw too many picks. If you're taking Minnesota, I would pick Minnesota to win the game.
It can't be overstated how awful of a decision it was to take Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell in the draft. I mean, even if Jamar Chase looks great, it was still a bad call. But the way that he's playing right now, that's rough. And so you've got Burrow coming back off the knee injury. Jamar Chase hasn't looked good. The Bengals defense struggled against the run last year. It could be a big day for Dalvin Cook if you've got him in your fantasy leagues. Definitely want to play him. Under Mike Zimmer, the Vikings have rotated between 7 and 8 win seasons and double-digit wins. They went 7 and 9 last year. This should be a double-digit win season. I think they get off to a hot start, and I think they beat the Bengals pretty easily in Week 1.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to push back. Penei Sewell does not look great. In Detroit, there's been a lot of a bad buzz around Penei Sewell. I think that they tried to flip his position from left tackle to right tackle, and it has not went well. So maybe neither of them were the right pick. Maybe they should have taken Devonta Smith. I don't know.
Who's the Bengals left tackle?
No, yeah, that's fair. Maybe they should have taken Slater. I've heard Slater looks great for LA.
I mean, to be fair, you probably don't draft a guy that's a generational talent at left tackle and then be like, hey, why don't you go play right tackle? But that's neither here nor there. Maybe we'll talk about that when we get to Detroit, I guess. So Arizona, the Arizona Cardinals, the Fighting Cliff Kingsburys, traveled to Tennessee to play the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee Titans obviously lost Arthur Smith in the offseason, so he is gone. But they've made a sizable addition in acquiring Julio Jones. So you've got Julio Jones to factor in. You've got Derrick Henry, who he's had a tremendous workload the last 2 seasons. You typically don't see guys play well after a workload like that, but he got that workload 2 years ago. I'd say he looked fine last year. What do you think happens in this game?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people that I talk to in the fantasy industry always push the Derrick Henry regression. They were pushing it last year. They're pushing it this year. I think we kind of just need to start realizing that maybe Derrick Henry is not really he doesn't pertain to those regression rules that we expect with these types of running backs. Maybe it's just due to his body and how much of an absolute monster he is and the beating he can take. But we can't expect regression with how insane he's been. And Julio is such an important addition to that offense. It takes so much pressure off of A.J. Brown, off of Derrick Henry, even off of Ryan Tannehill. And I kind of understand when you have a coach like Mike Vrabel, a defensive guy, I kind of understand allocating all of these resources to your offense, allocating so many resources to having maybe the best, running back receiver combination in the NFL. For Tennessee to add to Ryan Tannehill, who they paid to keep around. So maybe that's smart to kind of keep your defensive costs low if you think Vrabel can coach your guys up. Obviously, he has to do that because he didn't really do it quite well last year. But the closer we're getting to the season, the more I'm looking at Tennessee on the same level as the contenders in the AFC with KC, Buffalo, Cleveland, and Baltimore. I think those top 5 teams in the AFC all have a legitimate shot to make the Super Bowl, and I think that they win in week 1 here.
So they lose Jonnu Smith. They get Julio Jones. That's obviously a net win, in my opinion. You got Derrick Henry. The Cardinals. The thing with the Cardinals is they're so hot and cold. They started the year so well last year. They faded down the stretch when teams learned how to make Kyler Murray stay in the pocket. The Cardinals have such a shallow depth of target. Everything. It's all the bubble screens just playing horizontally, and at some point they have to try to stretch the field vertically. And I just don't know that they're going to do that. At the end of the day, I don't trust either one of these teams, but I trust Cliff Kingsbury much less. So I would pick the Cardinals in this game if I was picking it. Marky Mark says, I said I would pick the Cardinals. I was already reading his comment. I would pick the Titans. I don't take the Cardinals in this game. But Marky Mark says Arizona wins. The Arizona has a better defense this year. The Titans have issues on defense. And Rufus Rogers chimes in and says Henry isn't human. And yeah, I think I can agree with that. He's just a different breed of a back.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. I think he's the 3rd best running back I've seen in my lifetime. I always say LT and AP are top 2. I think number 3 is open for debate. I think Derrick Henry's number 3.
Yeah, he's certainly up high on that list for sure. So moving on to the next game, we have the San Francisco 49ers traveling to the Motor City to take on the Detroit Lions. What are your thoughts on this one, Mark?
I've thrown San Fran money line in a couple teasers, so I think this is a lock. I think if you're in a survivor pool out there, I would go with the San Fran 49ers as my survivor pick. I just don't see Detroit getting off to a 1-0 start against San Fran. Even if San Fran is running a 2 QB system, I trust Shanahan to be the guy to figure that out. So I think San Fran wins quite easy here.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions' offense was bad with Matthew Stafford, and they made a sizable downgrade to Jared Goff. Their defense was last in points and yards allowed last year. I don't see how they move the ball or how they stop the 49ers, regardless of who's playing quarterback. I think the 49ers win this game easily. Easiest pick of the week.
Agreed.
All right, so Pittsburgh Steelers traveling to Buffalo to play the Buffalo Bills. Now, this is a rematch of a Week 13 game last year. And in that game, Buffalo held Pittsburgh to 224 total yards, and they won that game as the Steelers kind of faded down the stretch. So do you think the Steelers are able to bounce back and get going strong again this year, or what do you see happening in this one?
No, I think the Steelers are a fraud. I think they're going 7-10, 6-11 this year, and the Bills are a legitimate Super Bowl contender. So I think they make that clear in week 1, and I think that they blow Pittsburgh out. I actually haven't made a bet on this game. I probably will end up taking Buffalo. I think it's 6.5, but I think Buffalo covers that spread and wins the game.
Yeah, I mean, in all of that too, TJ Watt may or may not even play. We don't know. He's still not practicing. He wants a new contract. The Steelers' defense needs to be elite for them to have a chance. Big Ben really faded down the stretch last year. I think he's totally done. The offensive line lost 4 or 5 starters. I don't know how you're able to run the ball, even with Najee Harris, to the degree that you're going to need to be able to protect Big Ben behind an offensive line like that. So the defense needs to be elite. I don't think they are, and they definitely aren't if TJ Watt doesn't play. I'm easily taking Buffalo at home in this one. So on now to what may be one of the biggest, most anticipated games of the week. We've got the Cleveland Browns traveling to Arrowhead Stadium to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. I would call this my game of the week. What do you think about this one?
For sure, I think it is the game of the week, and I think these are 2 Super Bowl contenders. And so much of me wants to take the Browns +6 in this game, but I just can't do it. I'm going to stay away. This is a toss-up to me. I really don't know who wins the game. I'll go with an upset. I'll say the Browns win just for fun here. Just because I think that the Browns are on this level, and I think that the Chiefs could start slow. But Andy Reid has had tremendous success in week 1 throughout his career. So it's probably not smart to go against the Chiefs, but I'll say that the Browns are the story of the NFL after week 1.
Yeah, so the Chiefs, they really prioritized shoring up the offensive line, which was the weakness of their team a year ago. I mean, we all saw it in the Super Bowl. They trade for Orlando Brown. They signed Joe Tooney. They drafted Creed Humphrey, who was one of my guys in the draft. And they return all their playmakers on offense. And so how do you slow down that offense? Well, you don't, really. You got to outscore them. And so can Cleveland outscore the Chiefs? Well, they certainly have the weapons to do it. You've got OBJ, if he can click finally with Baker Mayfield. They've got Jarvis Landry. They've got Nick Chubb, who's got to be one of the top, 3 or 4 backs in the league. And so I think the biggest thing to watch in this game for me is, can Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney give that new look Kansas City offensive line trouble? If they're able to get pressure off the edges, if they're able to, get Mahomes back into that fight or flight sort of mentality that we saw in the Super Bowl, maybe they've got a chance. And then, can Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, John Johnson, can those guys contain Tyreek Hill and Jason Kelce? Now, obviously, nobody can totally contain them, but can you slow them down enough? I think this is going to be a great game. I can't pick against the Chiefs, but it wouldn't shock me to see Cleveland come in and pull up the upset. I think the swinging factor for me goes down to who has the best quarterback. It's the Chiefs. Who has the best coach? And I think that's also the Chiefs. And so I'm going to take the Chiefs, but this is definitely a game that I'll have an eye on.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I just love the additions that Cleveland made on the defense, just on every level of the defense, with Clowney, with Malik Jackson on the inside, with JOK so late, with John Johnson, the guy you mentioned there. And then not to mention guys that they're getting back who they didn't have last year in Greedy Williams and in Grant Delpit. Those guys could be helpful as well. So I just think that there's so many pieces on this Cleveland defense to add to guys like Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward, who are top 5 at their positions in the NFL, in my opinion. So I'm very excited about this Browns defense. It's a rough matchup, and the Browns have a tough schedule to start out the year. So even if the Browns do get off to a rough start, and even if they do lose this game, I don't necessarily think that makes them a bad team or anything.
Absolutely. Nobody can be called a bad team for losing to the Chiefs in week 1. Rufus on YouTube chimes in. He's with you. He says the Browns by 3. The Chiefs defense is not enough for all those weapons. And the Browns definitely do have the better defense in this game. And so that is definitely something to keep an eye on. I'm really interested to see Greg Newsome on the field. He was one of my guys in the draft. I think he's a perfect fit for what Cleveland wants to do, especially, not having to be the number 1 guy with Ward out there.
No, it's a perfect fit.
Okay, moving on, we have Green Bay. This game is in Jacksonville, but they're playing the New Orleans Saints. Obviously, it is in Jacksonville at TAA Bank Field because of the hurricane. The Superdome is still without power, and New Orleans will probably be away from their home facilities for, I think they said, the first month of the season. So, so it's essentially a neutral site game. Jameis Winston's the starting quarterback for the Saints, just like we all knew he would be. Sean Payton acted like Taysom Hill had a chance. Everybody knew he didn't. To me, Alvin Kamara is going to be the feature of this game for the Saints. He's going to be leaned on heavily, and the defense has to show up against Aaron Rodgers, which is easier said than done. I mean, I trust an Aaron Rodgers-led offense more than a defense that's tasked with stopping him. And at the end of the day, I think that Jameis Winston just is who he is, and I think he slings the ball all around the field, but I think he just makes one too many mistakes. And I think the Packers walk away from this one with a Week 1 win.
Yeah, I don't get the line here. I think this should be up around the touchdown. It's only at Green Bay -4.5. Green Bay's the better team here, the much better team, in my opinion. Green Bay is a contender. New Orleans is a team that I think would be lucky to go above 500. And I'm a guy who's higher on Jameis Winston than I think consensus. And I think Jameis could have a really good day. I'm not so sold that New Orleans has the weapons to pull off a game like this in a high-scoring affair against Green Bay beyond Alvin Kamara. I think Alvin Kamara is probably a top 2 running back in football, in my opinion, maybe top 3 running back in football. But outside of Kamara, I know Callaway has looked really good. I know Traquan Smith has had moments. I know they have a couple other guys, but I don't know what New Orleans can do if this is like a back and forth high-scoring affair and Jameis has to throw it around the yard. I just don't know if Green Bay can take out Kamara, what New Orleans would be able to do. So I like Green Bay to win this game pretty handily.
Marky Mark chimes in and says he thinks the Saints are going to get the upset. Green Bay has no left tackle and a rookie center. And so, yeah, that's offensive line woes. Those can definitely get to even a veteran guy like Rodgers. So that's something to keep an eye on. Next game on the list is the Denver Broncos at the New York Giants. What do you think about this one?
Whew, I don't think much. This is a tough game to figure out. I don't know what Denver is. I think that there's kind of weird optimism out there in the media for both of these teams to make the playoffs. I've seen some Giants to win the NFC East buzz, which is crazy to me. And then I've seen some Denver Broncos to make the playoff buzz from a couple of NFL writers like Greg Rosenthal, a couple other guys out there that love Teddy Bridgewater. And I'm not a Teddy Bridgewater hater by any means, and I think he's an improvement on Drew Lock, but I don't think either of these teams are 8 or 9 win teams. I think these are probably 5 to 7 win teams. Denver does have a strong defense, does have a strong front four to go against a bad O-line that the New York Giants have. So maybe that is the advantage that gives Denver the win. So I'll take Denver hesitantly. I don't know. This is a stay away from me.
Rufus chiming in and saying the Saints only have one player. Rodgers is going to be a man on a mission. And I forgot to mention, I took the -4.5 for Green Bay. So I've got money on that one as well. So for the Broncos and the Giants, so Teddy Two Gloves is a starter for Denver. Daniel Jones is a starter for the Giants. He's 8-18 as a starter. To me, the New York offense is really bad. Saquon's still not 100%, which isn't something that you want to hear. Kadarius Toney's questionable, and he hasn't even really practiced this offseason. So even if he plays, what is he going to do? Kenny Golladay is questionable. Evan Ingram is questionable. Like, I don't know who Daniel Jones is throwing the ball to if his offensive line is even able to keep him upright. The Giants' defense was good last year. I think they've got potential to be a pretty good unit this year, but are they really better than the Broncos' defense? I don't think they are. And so when you look at this matchup, I think Daniel Jones is the better quarterback, but Teddy Bridgewater has the better weapons. He's got the better coaching, and he's got the better defense at his disposal. So I'd take the Broncos in this one.
I think Teddy's the better quarterback personally, but I'm as low as anyone you'll find on Daniel Jones. I just don't see it with Danny J.
I'm pretty low on both of them, but I think in a pinch I'd probably go with Daniel Jones.
I think Teddy's a good backup, like a really good backup. I don't even know if I would want Daniel Jones as backup personally, but I don't like Daniel Jones. I'm out on him because of the turnovers. But to your point about Saquon, it is not a great sign that it's like he's on the verge of playing. He's going to practice soon. It's like it's been almost a year. Like you see a lot of guys with ACLs nowadays. I mean, Adrian Peterson came back in like 5 months, 4 months. You've seen a ton of guys out there running like 6 months later, 8 months later, 9 months later. I think it tells you this was a severe injury. This was a serious injury that he's still coming back from. And even when he is cleared, even when he does start playing, this isn't something where he's just going to be the same Saquon we saw a couple of years ago or 2 years ago. I don't know. I'm concerned about Saquon.
You know who I would rather have as a backup quarterback than either Daniel Jones or Teddy Two Gloves?
Gardner Minshew.
Either one of those teams should have easily outbid the Eagles for Gardner Minshew to come be their starting quarterback. But that might be beating a dead horse at this point. But
I agree.
Literally every team in the NFL should have been willing to give a 6th-round pick for that guy. And he should be a starter for several teams. But
I feel like Minshew is kind of just like a mustached version of what Teddy was before the injury. I feel like that's my take.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
I'd have to look at some numbers, but
Marky Mark says the Broncos win, Chubb and Miller feast, Bridgewater's the better quarterback. So he's with you. He's with you on the Bridgewater versus Daniel Jones debate. Hotly contested debate, I'm sure.
Well, we'll find out this weekend.
All right, so the next game, the Crimson Tide Bowl. We've got the Miami Dolphins at the New England Patriots. Tua Tagovailoa versus Mac Jones. What do you think about this one?
I'm biased. I'm a Tua guy. I loved Miami all offseason. I really wanted to bet against Cam Newton. I thought he was going to be the week 1 starter, and he is not a good NFL quarterback. So whatever you want to say about them cutting Cam Newton, I think that they made the right decision to go with Mac Jones here. Even if I'm not necessarily that high on Mac Jones, you don't know what you have yet. Why not find out? And you know that Cam Newton's not a starting level NFL quarterback. So if Mac Jones can just be average, they did go out there and get a lot of weapons. Maybe New England is the pick here. I'm going with Miami. Like, I don't love the bet though, with all of the uncertainty with what New England's offense is going to look like. It's obviously going to be so much different than it was last year. I know that everyone's tendency is kind of just to be like, oh, it'll be the same offense they ran with Tom Brady. I'd have to imagine that it'll be a little different with a rookie quarterback who's still learning his way. So I'm interested to see what that Patriots offense looks like.
You know who should go sign Cam Newton?
Who?
The Denver Broncos or the New York Giants.
I disagree. I don't even think he's as good as either of those guys. I'm that far on Cam. Like, I think his shoulder's shot, and I'm someone who used to be a big Cam fan.
Yeah, you can only sustain that style of play for so long.
For sure.
But so I took the Dolphins money line on this game. Mac Jones, rookie quarterback in his first start, against a pretty good defense from Miami. I look at money lines a little differently. I don't necessarily say Miami's definitely winning this game. I say they're an underdog that I think's got at least a coin flip shot, and so I'll take the better odds. I am going to pick Miami in this game. Obviously, I bet them, but I think it'll be a close one. New England's got a lot of new weapons on the offense. Most notably is Jonnu Smith. They get a lot of guys back to this defense for Bill Belichick. I'm really interested to see Tua in his second year to see if he takes that leap. Tua wasn't as bad as a rookie as a lot of people think. If you look at him statistically, he's on par with what rookies do. But the Fitzmagic sideshow and all that other stuff, the Dolphins didn't do him any favors last year. Kind of favoring that short term, let's make a push for the playoffs over long term development. But now Tua is the guy, at least for this year, and I think he'll take that leap. I think Miami walks out with the win.
I couldn't agree more. I think that that's very well said, and I think it's underreported. Chan Gailey was the offensive coordinator last year. It was the 4th time that he was the offensive coordinator of a Ryan Fitzpatrick team. Like, I think that relationship was probably terrible for Tua. Like, his offensive coordinator probably was very clearly showing favoritism the whole year, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was a big part of, Tua getting benched. And once Tua got benched the first time, he was looking over his shoulder. He was afraid to make mistakes. He wasn't going down the field. And I'm someone who made a lot of excuses for Tua last year, but I agree. He was nowhere near as bad as people want to make him out to be last year, but he doesn't have any excuses this year. He's got Myles Gaskin as a weapon. He's got Devontae Parker. He's got Will Fuller after the first 2 weeks. He's got Jalen Waddle now, and he's got Mike Gesicki. That's a whole lot of weapons with an improved offensive line. So hopefully Tua can take that next step. I'm curious, where did you have Tua as a quarterback prospect in his draft?
I'll look it up. I'll look it up while you talk about the next game, and I'll come back to you. So I've got it written down in my stuff. So Chicago travels to Los Angeles to take on the Rams. We are looking at Matthew Stafford's NFL debut with a competent team versus the Andy Dalton-led Bears. What do you got on this one?
Yeah, I said earlier on Twitter, I think Matthew Stafford is winning the Super Bowl and cementing his spot in Canton as a Hall of Famer. I've rolled my eyes at the Matthew Stafford Hall of Famer thing many, many times in the past, but if he adds a Super Bowl to his resume, he's probably a Hall of Famer with those numbers that he has, even with that terrible organization he played on. And the last couple great players that the Lions have had in Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders never got that opportunity to go compete for a Super Bowl elsewhere. So it's good that Stafford gets that chance. And I think the Rams win here week 1. I'm higher on the Bears than a lot of people. I think the Bears make the playoffs. I've said that, but I don't think that they start the season hot. And hopefully they're not playing Justin Fields in week 1 just to avoid him getting baptized by Aaron Donald. I hope that they're just kind of being smart and wait until week 2 or 3.
Yeah. So last year I had Burrow as QB1 slightly over Herbert. And then Tua was kind of that distant third for me. So, I liked Tua. I think I had him knocked down a lot with the hip stuff. And I mean, the injury stuff aside, I still had him as QB3, but I had him down I think lower than kind of consensus based on a few concerns and then the hip thing. That's just scary when you're talking about degenerative joint thing with a quarterback.
Yeah, I had him QB1. I was way too high.
Oh wow!
I was really high on Tua, so that was definitely a miss. I was just so obsessed with him in college and the way his feel in the pocket and his escapability. I hope that's something that kind of comes back. And a lot of people think that means he's going to run a lot. That's not necessarily what I mean. He just had like an innate sense of where pressure was coming from in the pocket in college in a way that I used to compare actually to young Carson Wentz. When Carson Wentz was first playing in 2016 and 2017 and on film from North Dakota State, I thought that there was a lot of similarities there. So I hope Tua can kind of show that a bit more this year.
Yeah, pocket mobility and escapability are definitely different. Yeah, I mean, you even look at a guy like Tom Brady. He's one of the least athletic dudes in the NFL. But how many times do you see him take a big shot in the pocket? He just senses that pressure. He's able to kind of slide away from it. It's always impressive. But for the Chicago game, I've got, Chicago's defense is what's won them games over the years. 3 years ago, they had the number 1 defense in the league. 2 years ago, it was number 4. And last year, it dropped to number 14. And so they're a defense that's sliding down. I've got no faith. I mean, Andy Dalton couldn't win games with the Cowboys' loaded offense last year. He's definitely not going to win games in Chicago. I don't think their offensive line can handle Aaron Donald. I think it's asinine that they're not starting Justin Fields anyways. But I think Sean McVay shows the world what he can do with a competent quarterback, of which he has never had one in Los Angeles. So I think the Rams roll in this one.
Agreed.
And then our last game of the Week 1 slate, Monday Night Football. For the first time in a long time, they're not doing a doubleheader, which I really appreciate because I
love
hated
the doubleheader.
That second game got over so late.
I want to pour one out for the doubleheader. I missed the 10-15 doubleheader. They would throw some random like commentary team on there from ESPN. It'd be like Mike and Mike. Like it used to be some random stuff. Chris Berman would go on there. I miss it. I'm gonna miss it.
Not me. I guess it's fine. It was so late. I guess I didn't have to stay up and watch though. So the Baltimore Ravens at the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders defense was terrible a year ago. Their offense was fine though. The Ravens have been hit hard by injury though. Rashad Bateman and Miles Boykin are both on IR. Juwan James is out for this game. J.K. Dobbins is out. Justice Hill is out. They signed Le'Veon Bell to their practice squad. I would imagine we see him in the game, which, again, is the biggest argument for not drafting running backs in the first round or paying them a second contract. I mean, Le'Veon Bell was the toast of the NFL like 3 or 4 years ago, and now he's on a practice squad. But I think this game could be closer than a lot of people think. Again, the Ravens' injuries, if the Ravens are fully healthy, I think they walk through this game easily. But with all the injuries, I think it's a lot closer game than people anticipate. However, I'm still taking the Ravens. That Lamar Jackson, he's a miracle worker. I think he can put a lot of the offense on his back, especially against a bad defense. And the Ravens' defense is just a different level. So I'm taking the Ravens in this one, but I do think it'll be a pretty good game.
Yeah, this is a game I won't be betting. The Raiders have started the last couple of years really hot under John Gruden, and they fade down the stretch. I could easily see them stealing a win here as a home dog. I think that they, like you said, the Ravens have had a lot of injury issues. This could be a slow starting year for the Ravens, but I'm not going to pick against Lamar Jackson. I think Baltimore probably wins. I think the Raiders probably cover. I think it's a 5.5 point spread. So, but I like you said, I think this is going to be a close game. I think Derek Carr, you called Lamar Jackson a miracle worker. You can make a case Derek Carr is too. I think Derek Carr is so underrated and underappreciated. He has had no weapons for most of his time there. I know Darren Waller's pretty good, but it really, if Henry Ruggs doesn't turn out this year, they are really, really going to be kicking themselves for passing on a guy like CeeDee Lamb and even Jerry Jeudy, Justin Jefferson a little farther down, but especially CeeDee Lamb, because I just remember when they took Henry Ruggs, it was one of those, what are you doing? Like, and I liked Ruggs. Like, I wasn't out on Ruggs, but CeeDee Lamb was just and I don't use this often. I thought CeeDee Lamb was a generational wide receiver prospect. I had CeeDee Lamb graded higher than any of the receivers in this year's class, which I thought was an amazing receiver class. So I don't know how I ended up here killing the Raiders for not drafting CeeDee Lamb, but the Raiders still have a problem at receiver. If they had that fixed, maybe if Antonio Brown didn't go crazy 2 years ago and would have stayed on the Raiders, maybe that would have fixed that and helped Derek Carr out a lot. But they really have not fixed that problem.
Yeah, Derek Carr is one of those guys that if he had a different last name, I think he'd get a lot more respect around the league and from the media. Not dissimilar to if Eli Manning had a different last name, there wouldn't be a soul talking about Eli Manning for the Hall of Fame one day. So that last name, that pedigree, it definitely matters.
Agreed, for sure. And him going to Fresno State also, he doesn't have that base of college fans that'll argue for him either. Like, I feel like everyone, like anytime any quarterback comes available or anytime there's any drama with like Rodgers or Russell Wilson or anyone out there, it's always like, oh, the Raiders, like Gruden doesn't want Derek Carr. Gruden doesn't like Derek Carr. And it's like, they should be thanking their lucky stars they have Derek Carr. He's been keeping them afloat the last couple of years. Like I have a Raiders fan friend who hates Derek Carr, and I just don't get it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's about going to do it for our first preview show. You guys be sure and tune back in next week. You can tell us everything that we were wrong about. We'd love to hear it. Mark, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm sure I'll do a Tough Cover podcast, so you can come check it out there at Tough Cover Pod. Later on this week, I'll probably do my favorite college football bets, my favorite NFL bets. Can't wait to watch the Eagles win on Sunday.
Absolutely. My final thought for today is that this is not a good time to need a quarterback. Teams that passed on taking a quarterback in the last draft, the Falcons, the Lions, the Panthers, Broncos, maybe even the Eagles and the Giants, they may live to regret that decision. You tune in and watch college football week 1, and Spencer Rattler showed the same carelessness with the football in week 1 as he did all of last season. Sam Howell looked dreadful against Virginia Tech. I mean, it's just September. Plenty of time for things to change. It's too early to hit the panic button, but for the handful of teams that passed on this quarterback class in 2021, the early returns in 2022 do not look promising.
I think you're being a little bit too hard on your fellow Sooner there. I don't think Rattler was all that bad. I know that they had a rough second half, and I know that there was some carelessness, but Howell, I won't push back on Sam Howell. That was not a good performance, but I think you're being a little hard on Rattler.
Oh, well, I'm sure we'll get into it as we get closer to draft. I don't think Rattler's a bad player. I just think he's totally careless with the football, which you'd like to see that coached out of him going into year number 2 as a starter. So hopefully they'll get there. He started like this last year and smoothed out down the year.
Yeah, he's definitely someone I'm going to be keeping a close eye on going forward for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us for episode number 7 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on this preview show, and we know that you do, be sure and smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode, and drop us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. You can follow Mark at Mark Henry Jr. So from me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.